Okay, I did have a gameplay in the works, Killzone gameplay, Killzone 2 multiplayer, but that I was just working on it right now, just 5 minutes ago, and Windows Movie Maker stopped working, so that went down the drain. The topic I had thought of originally was talking about something I heard on a podcast, and it's called, the podcast is Orthodoxy and Heterodoxy, and it was by a father and a priest and pastor at a church. I think it was an Antiochian church somewhere, but he was talking about Roman Catholicism and how their theology compares to Orthodoxy, and so I thought that would be an interesting topic, although I changed my mind on that, and I was going to, with the gameplay, talk about why it matters what we believe, or does it matter what we believe? That was the question I was going to pose, and I'm kind of thinking about it, and it's hard to say because we're all equally unaware of the absolute true nature of things. As humans, I believe that I'm pretty sure that we are unable to ever come to a 100% conclusion on almost anything, but there are some, and I'm speaking in spiritual things, there are some other things, mathematics and whatnot, numbers I guess, that you can calculate and be fairly certain, if not absolutely sure about. But I don't speak of mathematics, I don't talk about that stuff, so I'm talking in spiritual terms, religious terms, things like that, classic and SD stuff. So what do you guys think? Can you know for sure? Well, actually, it doesn't matter. I don't think you can know for sure necessarily. That's why it's faith for the most part. And one of the things he talked about, the father talked about in the, it was a seminar, kind of, I guess, sermon, if you will, about it. He said that the Orthodox do not believe we can approach God in a logical way, a scholastic way, as it were. Now, whether or not he said those actual words, I'm not 100% certain, although the message was very clear. It's a different approach from the East and the Orthodox to the West, Catholic, Protestant. You know, I noticed that, and I had heard this before in a talk given by a priest, the Catholic and Protestant approach is, when dealing with, let's just say, attacks on the faith or whatever, is to prove God. The apologetics sort of field, if you will. That's very heavily prevalent in the West. In Protestantism, basically most apologists, apologetics, anyway, are Protestant, and that is what the particular priest was saying. As Orthodox, they don't approach it that way. It's not like you have to prove God's existence. He's our Father in heaven. we can know that for a fact, and there's really no need for apologetics. At least that's the way I would take that. Now, apologetics when it comes to the one true church or not, why is Orthodoxy the true church? Why are Protestant and Roman Catholic doctrines wrong? As the priest was talking about specifically Roman Catholic doctrines in the podcast I just listened to, that's a, I wouldn't call it as much apologetics, but it's definitely trying to sort out the true doctrines, what the church holds to be true. Now, I am not an expert, as I've probably said before, on things Orthodoxy. I'm still learning, and I'm uncertain about a lot of things, but it does bother me because I think I need things to be more black and white, as the video is, for example. And so I like the analytical, knowing 100%, like, oh, this is what I should believe, this is what I believe, ergo, I'm on the right track, you know, I feel good about myself. And that is the main part of my recent religious revival and spiritual confusion stuff in my life, and finding Orthodoxy to be the most comforting in a way. The only thing to be able to smooth out that confusion a bit, at least for now. I think that confusion was, you know, I just wanted it to all be black and white. I wanted it to be, okay, you know, in my head it had to be 100%. But as in the podcast, for example, which I'll probably post his name down below in the comments and or the description, wherever, you know, in the description, YouTube. He said that that's not the approach of Orthodoxy either. Besides not being scholastic, as it were, but to not put things in little compartments and be 100% and try to analyze everything. And it's just not that, like I said, scholastic. Now, that doesn't mean there's none of that in Orthodoxy. In fact, I think he said that wasn't the case, but it's day and night in some cases when you compare that to, especially Protestantism. Now, I know I've said Protestantism a lot on this channel, but it's what I've known for my whole life. And as Americans in particular, or Canadians, I'm sure, even Europeans too, it's usually either Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, or Protestantism. There's not a lot of Orthodoxy. So the theology is generally Protestant. The things that people reject, say atheists, let's just say, people who actively go against, not like go against the teachings of the church, but give up the teachings of the church, are either probably from Catholic or Protestant. And that's for American atheists, not the organization, but people who've lost faith, as I did. It was sort of not a rebellion, but it's in reaction to this Western idea. So without even probably knowing Orthodoxy, and that's what I think is most unfortunate, is that, you know, we're given this thing called Christianity, and yet you even ask Protestant pastor or something, they might not even know a lot about Orthodoxy. Maybe they do from seminary, but the idea is the teachings aren't there. Now, there are some things that Protestants and Orthodox would agree on, and Catholics and Orthodox would agree on, but as far as the fullness of it, it's not there. And so, like I said, people lose faith. It's from that Western perspective. And they're, like I said, night and day in some cases, between the two, East and West. To keep it in geographical sort of understandings, most Orthodox are east of here. Eastern Europe, Western Asia, Middle East, and so I'm keeping it East and West, and that's how the schism happened, the Great Schism, East and West, basically. So, that kind of leads me to my next thought, and that was something I read from an Orthodox Christian. He said that he was talking about, I think, why Orthodoxy is true, but the true church, the problems within Protestantism, and one of the things he pointed out, and I never thought of this, but the Anglican, let's just say Anglican, Lutheran, I think High Church Protestants, the more traditional ones, they retain a lot of Roman Catholic practices. Lutherans, most notably, there are a lot of things that are somewhat kept the same, and I've never experienced a service of Lutheranism in the Lutheran Church per se. However, I'm taking this with a basic understanding of what he's talking about, historically speaking. Think about this. Martin Luther rejected the claims of Rome, just the Roman Catholic Church. And that's what the Reformation was, the Protestant Reformation, protesting of Rome. And so what this writer this blogger, this Orthodox writer had said was that, like, they retained those practices, but oddly enough they had the vestments of the Roman priests. And so I thought that was interesting. He said white robes, white cassocks or something like that. Maybe not cassocks, but and then there's other things that are sort of peculiar. I could find that article and put it below also, but so that's another thing to consider when, now I'm talking about Orthodoxy and whatnot, but the comparison between Orthodoxy and Protestantism is not really talked about a lot. It's usually Catholic versus Protestant. When I'm reading articles about it, they don't mention Orthodox as much. Usually, try to explain what I'm talking about. Say you're reading an article about denominations written by perhaps an apologist from America, most likely, someone who is Protestant, evangelical, let's say. I've read plenty of those articles, and sometimes mention Eastern Orthodoxy, but it's usually they mention Catholics, Presbyterians, Lutherans, Methodists, Presbyterians, Pentecostal, and so on. So that would be from, like I said, it's the perspective of the West. And so, back to the original question, I guess. Does it matter what we believe? I think it does. Now, that's why I searched. The point of searching is to come to a deeper faith and spirituality. Now, was that my goal? I don't know. I can't really remember. But all I know is I found Orthodoxy through some research and readings. And at first it didn't intrigue me, especially at very first, which was probably back in 10th grade. I'm now a freshman in college, but as I began to actually examine it, and then experience the liturgy for myself, that was what really, I think, drove it home. But, yeah, I was searching for nothing in particular, but historically speaking, if you go back in history, it's quite clear that Orthodoxy is a little more original than the others. And I have no problem saying that whatsoever, because if you look at the creeds, Nicene Creed, that was changed by Rome, the Filioque, that's how it's pronounced, which is Latin for "and the Son." Look that up, Filioque. It's controversy, but it's important. I think it's important, you know. And then the first 7 ecumenical councils, I think it was 7, might have been 6. The Orthodox Church recognizes those, and then after that there were Roman ones, a few of their own after the schism. But those creeds and those councils set forth, which the creeds came from the councils, those set forth in the early church what the church believes, what Christians should believe if they're going to be Christians. It doesn't always get down to the little things, like, you know, when you say the creeds, it's not going to say, and I believe that priests should have beards or whatever. You know, that's a smaller issue, and then so that wouldn't be that big of a deal. Now, does that mean I would, you know, do I think that all Christians are Christian and it's all the same? No, not at all. There are major differences, and I urge people to look at the differences, but you know, it's really up to you. I don't like saying that either, because if there's one truth, there's one truth. So I would pose the question, well, what's, you know, to say that, who's anyone to say that Christianity isn't the only true religion? Can you say that? Some people would say no, you can't say that, or no, it's not. They're all, you know, all the religions are equal, which I don't agree with. Also, I just take it a step further and say, well, what about denominations? Because there are major differences. You know, if it all comes down to faith in Jesus, well, alone, and that's the end all, which I don't know if anyone really believes that per se. But let's just say just Jesus, not his church, you know, and how to live. Well then, you know, I'm just saying I think there's one way, and that's just kind of it. So, you know my views. They may change in the future, they may not. They may get different, become different, change, man. But as far as the question goes, yes, it matters what you believe, but it matters what you do also. So, you know, it's tough, because I can't say from a human perspective 100% anything. Especially me, I don't know anything about even what I do. Like, I don't know all the tips and tricks to making videos. I don't know how to play the violin perfectly. I don't know all the things in the video game Dishonored. You know, I'm not an expert on anything really. So Anyway, that's my thing. Camera's burning out, battery's dying. Think about that and check out the stuff below. That is the podcast, the guy's name, and the article. So I'll see you guys later. Thank you for watching, and remember, Christos anesti. Christ is